The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we've initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of this session is AngularJS, Superheroic JavaScript MVW framework. Our guest speaker today is Linjit NP. He is a senior UI/UX developer at Accentric Web Solutions Limited. He has been working in UI/UX development using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, along with related technologies like AngularJS, Node.js, Less.css, etc., creating responsive interface applications. We expect this webinar to last for about an hour with 40 to 45 minutes of presentation and remainder time for Q&A round. So if you have any questions, please submit them using questions tab in your control panel. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Linjit.
Thank you, Deepika. Hey all, thank you for registering this session. It's all about AngularJS Superheroic framework. So in this session, what are we going to discuss? So what is the objective of our today's session? Here we will discuss about, first one will be introduction to AngularJS. What is AngularJS and why do we need to use AngularJS in our application? Normally, Java MVC framework we will be using in server side like in .NET or Java. Then why do we need to use MVC framework in client side? Next one, we have some features in AngularJS like controllers, directives, filters, and other things. Here we will be discussing about what is this controller in AngularJS and how can we inherit the controllers. So if you are using multiple controllers in our AngularJS, so how can we inherit the parent controller property in child controller? So how can we do this? So that we will be discussing. Next, each and every web application will be having tabs. That's what we are calling it as route in AngularJS. So if you want to navigate one tab to next tab in normal traditional web application, just we will be reloading the whole web page. So we'll be losing our context or we will be losing the variables and other stuff. But instead of losing those contexts, I want to load a particular template inside a web application. That can be achieved by routes. So we'll be discussing about this routes and nested routes in AngularJS. Last one will be building widgets. So if you want to build any custom components in AngularJS, we have a method called custom directives. Using those custom directives, we should be able to build our own functionality in AngularJS. That also we'll be discussing in our session. So let's go into our first module. First, what is AngularJS? AngularJS actually originally developed in 2009 by Misko Hevery and Adam Abras. Later it has been taken over by Google. So they has made it as an open source JavaScript framework. Why do we need to use AngularJS? So in the traditional web applications, normally we will be writing all our business logics, everything in our server side in Java, .NET, PHP or whatever it is. But if you want to have more control over in our client side itself, I want to write my business logics in client side itself. So for that, we need some powerful framework over there. That's why we are coming up with JavaScript frameworks in our client side itself. If you see, we have more JavaScript frameworks like Ember.js, Backbone.js, and Angular. Over there, if you compare these frameworks, normally this AngularJS is better than other frameworks. Everything is a normal MVC framework, but here in AngularJS there are more contributors and we have more modules available. So it will be easy to learn also compared to other frameworks. Next, why do we need AngularJS? So AngularJS is really simple compared to other JavaScript frameworks and we can have more control on our client side. For example, Normally, the traditional web applications, the UI developers they will build normal HTML, CSS, and they will do some basic JavaScript validations alone. But if you want to do beyond that, have to implement all the business logics in the client side. If you want to improve the performance, for that we will be using this AngularJS. How can we achieve these things? Here in AngularJS, we have some features like two-way binding, custom directives, and the validations, inbuilt validations, everything. Normally, in AngularJS, we have some feature called two-way binding. What is it? So, if you are changing anything in your view, automatically your model will be updated. You need not to manually watch this view changes and update the model. This will be done automatically. So, it will increase your productivity because each and every key up event or anything you need not to watch, automatically it will be binded to our model. Next one, simplicity. It is not a rocket science. It is really simple. It is like a normal JavaScript only. We don't have any complex syntax and other things. It is having it can extend normal HTML syntax itself. For example, if I want to build a normal click event over here in our AngularJS, what do we do? Just we will be adding some basic attribute like ngClick and pass the function, like how we do in our normal JavaScript. In JavaScript, if you want to on-click on something, if you want to call the functionalities, we will be having on-click method. On on-click, we'll pass particular function. Whenever you click on that button or particular HTML elements, it will call that method. Whatever the logic you have written in the method, that will be executed. In the same way, in AngularJS also, all the directives, everything is simple, similar to our normal HTML and JavaScript. And then testing. If you're building a web application, first we have to do unit test case for the web app. Normally, in the server side only, they will be writing unit test case for each and every methods. But if you're using any other JavaScript framework, we should be able to write unit test case for the client side methods also. So if you write a unit test case, it will reduce the code error. For example, I am writing a simple functionality like whenever I click on particular button, it has to add variable A and B. It has to store that result in the C. Just by a typo error, instead of making it as a plus B, I made it as a minus B. So if I'm not writing any test cases or if I'm not validating, what will happen? Just it will go over there, it will throw the error. It will be captured in our QA. Instead of that, for each and every methods, if I write the unit test case, once I complete my method, I will write my unit test case and I will run those unit test cases. It will validate your method, then it will give you the result, whether this method is success or not. For that, in AngularJS, we can use Karma tool and Jasmine framework to write the unit test cases. Unit test cases alone doesn't enough. If the QA want to test the end-to-end application, they can't do manual testing. Sometimes we'll be having a very big application. Each and every functionality they can't test it. So they can write a automation test scripts using Protractor that are also supported in AngularJS. Next one is flexible and extensible. This AngularJS is extensible in any applications. For example, if I'm using a JavaScript in my server side or .NET, that doesn't matter. You can build the client side in AngularJS. In the same way, already I built my web application with normal JavaScript and jQuery. I can't change over the whole application in a single stretch. I want to change by module. So how can I do this? For that, you can make a particular module alone in AngularJS. In step-by-step progress, you can change all the modules from normal JavaScript to AngularJS framework. That is also possible if you are using an AngularJS framework. Next, popularity. So AngularJS actually built and launched on 2009, but since 2010 and 2011, it is reaching over popularity. Most Fortune companies are using AngularJS framework for their development. For example, Google, Yahoo, and YouTube, PayPal, these guys are using AngularJS as a client-side framework for their websites. Next, what are all the features we have in AngularJS? So now you can see it in the screen. These are all the available more features. But in our session, we'll be discussing a few features like two-way binding and dependency injections, filters, services, and expressions. First one, two-way binding. In our traditional web application, if you use normal JavaScript or jQuery, what do? Whenever I change anything in my text box or text area, we will take that value and have that value send it to the backend. Then once backend gives the response, again take that response, bind it to the value. This is what you have to do. For each and everything you have to write a code. But if you use AngularJS, you do not to handle these kind of functionalities. Everything will be handled automatically using this two-way binding feature. So in AngularJS, it is having a $watch service. This watch service will be always watching your view of your web application. View is just your presentation layer, that HTML page. It will be watching. Whenever change happens in your view, automatically it will update your model. Vice versa, if you are updating your model, for example, you are getting the response from the backend, then your model will be updated. So automatically it will update the view. So you need not to write any code for this model and view update. Automatically it has been done in AngularJS. Next one, dependency injections. If you see the normal web application, all the files will be loaded in the initial load itself. Actually, if you do that, it will affect the performance. Instead of that, whenever you want a specific services or modules, you can inject those modules as a dependency injection in the web application. That is possible. That's what we are calling it as a dependency injection in AngularJS. Next, expressions. So expressions it is similar to our JavaScript eval method. So what do? In the HTML itself, if you want to evaluate a particular functionality, for example, I have 5 plus 5. If you write it in HTML, what will happen? Just it will print 5 plus 5. I don't want that. Just I want the result of 5 plus 5. So what do we need to do? We have to evaluate the expressions, whatever you entered over there, and it has to print the result on the view. That is also available in AngularJS. So inside the expressions, whatever the scope variable you are defining, that will be evaluated and the scope variable value will be printed in our view. Next one, directives. So directives is a normal abstraction layer for a functionalities whatever they build. In AngularJS, if you see, there are some popular directives like ng app, controller, or ng model, ng repeat, these things. Let's take an example of ng repeat directive. So what does it do? It will act like a for loop. In for loop, what it will be, if you have an array object, we can loop through the array object, we can get each and every element. In the same way, you can do that in the view itself. So in view, for example, I have a users array. Just I want to print the user name, designation, age, whatever in the view. That is possible if you are using ng repeat. So they built a functionality for this particular directive. Okay. So this directive will act as an abstraction layer. So whatever they have written for this directive, that we don't know. It is already built by AngularJS. In this way, they have built n number of directives. So if you want to achieve any functionalities, just you can call the directive, and whatever data if you want to pass for the directive, pass it. We can achieve those functionalities in AngularJS. Next one, filters. The directives are just abstraction layer for a function. But if you want to modify the data, for example, I have a data object. Normally, we won't store the normal data object in our DB. We will be storing full data object like 2011, no hyphen or slash anything, just 2011, 08 and 09. So I have a year, month and day. But if I show it to the user as this kind of big number, just it is an 8-digit number. That doesn't make any sense for the user. Instead of that, what you can do, you can pass that particular data object to the default AngularJS filter, and you can give the format also. Then it will pass your date into the specific format. It will give it in the human readable format. If you want to show it like year hyphen month hyphen day, or year and month in the full letters like May, June, whatever it is, then day. So you can parse it into any format, whatever you want. That we will be doing using our AngularJS filters. Then we have one more feature called routings. So if you want to implement the page navigations in AngularJS, we will be using this routing. If you see AngularJS, it is having two different routing modules. One is UI router and another one is NG router. This NG router is built by core AngularJS team. With the help of this NG router, whenever you navigate from one page to another page, it will be changing your URL browser. So if anything happens, change in the URL browser, it will capture that change, and we will be making the configuration for that URLs. So if it captures the change, it will load that specific content, whatever we wanted to load it in the content browser, that will be loaded in specific view. We won't be reloading the whole web application. Just whenever URL changes, we will take a template, we will load it into specific position wherever we have implemented. So it won't refresh the whole web application. We will be having our whole scope object over there in the browser itself. Next, JavaScript MVC framework. So we are talking about MVC. So what does it stand for? MVC. M stands for model, view for V, and C for controller. So whatever data you are handling it in your web applications, that is what we are calling it as a model. For example, what I am going to do, the same scenario will take. I wanted to show the user information in the UI. That information I will be getting it from the backend. Okay, it has been stored in SQL or MongoDB, wherever it is, and I am using some other servers, Java or .NET. Whenever I load the page, I will make a request to the web services, and I will be getting the data. Once I get the data, that will be available in our web application. That's what we are calling it as a model. So whatever data you wanted to show it in the user, or else you want to handle it in the client, that is what we are calling it as a model. Once you got the data, just if you have the data, that doesn't make sense. You have to show the data to the user, or else get the information from the user, update the data. You have to do this. So you have to show this data. How can you show? So we will be writing our HTML files. That is a presentation layer. That's what we are calling it as a view. Next one is controller. If you want to write any other business logics or validations, whatever you want to do it on the data before you send to the request, or once you got the response, if you want to do any validations, those things we will be doing it in the controller. This is normal JavaScript MVC. So how does Angular MVC works? So in the right side, whatever you are seeing, this is Angular MVC framework and working flow. So whenever this model changes, it updates the controller. In the controller, there will be a $watch service. It will be watching your model and view. Once the change happens in the model, it will update the controller. Just it will notify through the $watch service. Once the $watch service gets the information, okay, this particular field has been changed, automatically this $watch service triggers an event to the model. Okay, this service has been changed. Once this service has changed, the view updates the model. In the same way, if you are updating the view, the watch service watch for that view and triggers the event and update the model. In this way, AngularJS MVC frameworks works. Let's go to the next one. This is advantage of using MVC framework in our client side. So first main advantage is it is separating your model from the view. Normally in the traditional web application, JavaScript or jQuery, if you building a web application with JavaScript or jQuery, what will happen? So we will be having all this together, model and view. The data also will be available in the text area, do the down traversing and get the data, put it in the backend or whatever. So you have to do it in this way. So all the view and model has been together. But if you are doing, whenever you are doing with the MVC framework, what will happen? Your view has been separated from the model, right? So whatever data you are holding, it will be available in the controller itself as a model, the scope variable or whatever you are calling. Then your view is separated. So if you want to change the look and feel, you can just change the view alone. You don't need to change the whole web application. It is one of the main advantage of using MVC in the client side. Next one, whenever we build a web application with the proper MVC framework, it is giving easy, maintainable, extendable, and testable projects. Okay, so because each and everything is separated properly, your view will be separated, and the model and the controller. So sometimes if we are moving to the next project or next role, we have to give KT to the other people who are going to take care of it. Normally, if I build a very complex web application, what will happen? It will take a week or more than that days to give KT to the other people. But if you build it with the proper structure, that is MVC framework, it will be easy. Whoever sees that project, it will be clear for them. They can understand each and everything. Okay, this is where my model. Here only I will be getting the data, or I will be having my client-side data. Then, okay, this is my view. If I need to change anything in the look and feel, I have to change it over here. My logics, everything, whatever I have implemented, it will be right here. So this is giving the proper structure. So whatever it is, if you are building a very complex application also, it will give more maintainability. In the same way, you can implement all the testing frameworks. Like if you are using Karma tool, then Karma, the Jasmine framework, you can integrate for the unit test cases. Or if you want to write any automation testings, you can build it using our protector. These are all the advantages of using JavaScript MVC framework. Next, let's see the AngularJS architecture. In the left side, whatever you are seeing, this is your browser. So if you build a normal client-side HTML page, what we do, just we will open it in the browser. It will be rendered in the browser and it will give the result. In the same way, we will be passing the HTML into the browser. HTML will be having the static DOM. So what is a static DOM? Normal your HTML files without any other functionalities. That is what we are calling it as a static DOM. Once the static DOM loaded into the browser, what will happen? With the static DOM, we will be including our AngularJS script, and we will make it as a ng app folder, ng app also. That is one of the AngularJS directive. If your browser finds these two, what will happen? There is an AngularJS app, ng app. It will take the static DOM and it will be having a dollar injector service. And the service will be having two things. One is $compile and root scope. Root scope is like a global variable. So whatever you are defining with the root scope, you should be able to access this in all the controllers or whatever the functionalities or features you are using. Inside that, you can use this $root scope. So once you launch the web application, we will be having controllers. So each and every controllers are like, if you are a Java developers, it is like a normal classes. So the variable whatever you declared inside the class, that will be accessible only within the class. If you want to access the variable in another class, what you have to do? You have to inherit the class, or you have to share the data. Okay. In the same way, whatever the scope variable you are creating, that will be accessible only within that specific controller. But this AngularJS app is having the root scope variable. That root scope is accessible for all the controllers. It is like a global variable. And what we are doing, once you get the static DOM, the injector will pass that static DOM and the root scope variable to the compile method. So this compile method compiles this DOM with the $root scope method, and it will gives the dynamic DOM object. So this dynamic DOM object will be having all AngularJS features. Like if I have written ng click in my HTML, first that will be just a static DOM. That won't be having any other actions. If I click also, nothing will happen. But once it is passed to this ng app and once it's compiled with the root scope variable, it will be a dynamic DOM. So that feature will be appended to the functionalities. If I use ng click, then only it will get to know, okay, if ng click is used, I have to call this specific method when click happens. Or if I use the ng repeat, okay, if I pass any array to this ng repeat, you have to iterate the array, show the information to the UI. So your static DOM will become a dynamic DOM. It will get all the AngularJS features. Next, how can we write a basic AngularJS program? So what we need to do is, first you have to create a normal HTML. Then you have to bootstrap the AngularJS application inside your HTML, create a controller view, and run the application. These are all the steps to run your first AngularJS program. So how to do that? Okay, instead of seeing it in the screen, let's go ahead. We'll create a basic AngularJS program. Okay, so to build the AngularJS program, what we need, we need only AngularJS file. This is the AngularJS script file I have downloaded in angularjs.org. Then I have this. This is more than enough to build an AngularJS program. Now what I'm going to do, I will be just creating a normal HTML page. I'm going to call it as index.html. I have created a normal HTML page. Let me open it in my favorite editor, that is Sublime. Okay, it has been loaded. Let me clear all the projects, whatever I have. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just I will be loading my index.html over here. I don't have anything, it is a plain HTML page. So I have a shortcut in the Sublime. It will create this structure, Angular demo. Then first what I have to do, just I have to include my AngularJS script file. I have the file in my lib folder. So lib slash angular.min.js. So I have loaded this AngularJS script inside the normal HTML page. After that, what you have to do, once you include the script file, you have to use this ng-app directive. Wherever you are mentioning this ng-app directive, from there it will be considered as an AngularJS components. So what will it do? This whole object will be passed to the ng-app directive, and this normal static DOM will be compiled as a dynamic DOM. This is how it will work. So if I mention this ng-app inside the body, whatever I define in the body, that will be considered as an AngularJS components. But I wanted to do it in the root of the element. So root of the HTML page is HTML. So I am declaring my ng-app in the HTML element itself. So let's run this basic application. Saved. Open it in the browser. So I'm using normal Chrome browser. It will show whether you have any error or not. So everything is loaded properly. I don't have any error. If I write any other evaluate methods in the normal HTML page, what will happen is just it will print the same HTML components alone. It won't evaluate. For example, just I'm going to remove this ng-app. I'm not going to give this, and here I'm going to print 3 plus 3. So what will happen? It will print the same 3 plus 3 in the browser. You can see it right here. It is printing just 3 plus 3. It is not evaluating because it is not considered as an AngularJS project. So when will it be considered as AngularJS project? You have to mention your ng-app. So this, once you include the script file, it will search for this ng-app directive. If it finds the ng-app directive, underneath that whatever you have, that will be passed to this ng-app directive. So now let's see, I have included the ng-app directive. Refresh the web page. Instead of just printing the normal static DOM, it is compiling the document and it is giving the result over here. Here you can see the result 6. Now it is not printing 3 plus 3. The 3 plus 3 is a normal static DOM. There is no object binder. Okay, it is a nothing. It was giving the proper document element only. Now it has been compiled and it is giving the dynamic DOM. If you are binding any other events or anything else, it will be binded to it. Okay, this is how normal AngularJS web application will work. Instead of just mentioning it as an app, what I want to do, I have to give name for this application. I want to and declare this web application in the script. How can I do this? So instead of this one, I am going to pass a name called demo. I have done. Then let me create one more script file. I'm going to call it as a custom.js. Let me save this one. Where app equal to angular.js module of, this is how we will be creating a AngularJS module. Now whatever the name I have given in the app, it is a demo. Just I will be passing that module, and if I want any other dependencies for my web application, if I want to extend any other functionalities, I will be passing those dependencies to this bracket. Now I don't need any other dependency, just I want to create a basic web application. So I'm not at all passing any other dependencies, right? So I have created a basic web application. Now it will act as a same way. There is no change. What I have to do, first I have to include that script file right here. Otherwise you won't find the script. Am I right? Let's include the script. Source equal to custom.js. Let's refresh, and it is giving the result. In the same way AngularJS will work. Here if you want to create a controller, for example, instead of doing like this, I want to create some kind of functionalities. On click I want to throw the alert message, otherwise I want to show some data in the UI. How can I do this? Let's create a controller for it. So all the business logics and validations we will be implementing in the controller. So after controller, I'm creating, I'm going to call it as a test controller function, and I'm passing the $scope as a dependency injection for this controller. So I should be able to access the $scope in the controller, and whatever the scope variable I'm defining, it will be accessible in the controller view. $scope dot name equal to hello. Okay. Just I'm giving some string to this scope variable. Then I want to use the controller in my view. How can I do this? Div. So we have ng controller directive. For this controller, we will be passing your controller name, whatever you define. Then whatever you are defining inside this controller, you should be able to access all your scope variable. For example, if I print the name right here, whatever in the name I entered in the controller, I have given name as a hello, that will be displayed right here. So the scope variable should be accessible within this controller. If I try to print the same name outside of this controller, it is not giving that name. So here I am trying to print this name. It is not at all giving. So before that, let's put some other letters. So it should give the name right here, right? So if you see, it is not at all giving that name. It is just printing this 3 plus 3. I don't want this. You can see that name is not available because the scope will be accessible only within the controller view. So I defined the controller over here, so it will be accessible only within this div. Let's see what does it mean by two-way binding. I have defined my scope variable over here. If I want to access the scope variable in any other input elements, how can I do? Input type equal to text, and we have ng model directive. Just pass that scope variable to the model. So this will access as a model. So name, whatever you have, that will be passed to this ng model directive. Let's see this. If you see, let me put it in the h1 h3 tag, so it will be easy for us to understand. Refresh. So I have this name over here. So whatever entering in the text box, that will be automatically available. If you want to do this functionality, what you have to do, you have to watch for each and every key event. Key happens, you have to do this. But instead of that, just I have assigned the model. Whenever I type the data, it will be available over there. So this is how we will be building a controller. But I want to inherit the data between controllers. How can I do this? Let's take a look. So inside this controller, I'm going to create one more controller. Controller equal to second controller. Okay. So here also, I'm going to print the name. Here, what I have to do, I have to define the controller. Let's go here. In the same way, let's define this controller. But over here, I'm not going to define the scope variable. That, as we discussed, the scope variable should be accessible only within this controller area. So I'm creating two controllers. This is my parent and this is my child. So whatever the scope variable I defined in the parent controller, that should be accessible in the child controller. Now you can see this. So let's put a h1 tag for the child controller, so it will segregate inside child. So refresh. So whatever data I have it in the parent controller, if I edit, it will be available in the child controller. Reverse is not possible. So normally in the inheritance, what you can do, you can get the parent class data in the child. In the child, you can't get it. The same way, you can get the parent controller information in the child. This is what we are calling it as a controller inheritance in AngularJS. Let's go to our PPT again. So now we have seen the controller inheritance. So what is it happening? So you can access the parent property in the child controller using this. So it is enabling the polymorphism and code reusability. So if you want to define the object, you can define only in the parent. That should be accessible within the child also. This we have seen the demo for controller inheritance. Next, the routes. So if you want to build the route application, for example, whenever I change the URL, I want to load a particular data in the specific area. How can I do it? For this, we can use our AngularJS routes. In AngularJS, we have two different types of routes modules. One is ng route, another one is the UI router. Using this ng router, we can load only one level of data, but you can have multiple routes, child routes, and other things are not possible. But if you're using UI router, that's an external module, you can access the multiple routes, the child routes also. That's why instead of using ng route, we can go for the UI router to build the nested routing applications. Let's see how can we build a basic route in the AngularJS. Let's go back. Already created the UI router. Let's launch this. Open with Firefox. Now, whenever I click on this one, now I click on the products link, so you can see it right here. It is changing the URL, products, contacts, whatever I'm clicking, it is changing the URL, but it won't be reloading the whole web application. What we have to do, you have to create a configuration file. Whenever the URL changes, look for that URL changes and load the specific templates in the view. That's what we have to do. Let's take a look at this code. Let me close these things, the old one, whatever you opened. Yeah, this is fine. Control O, and I want to open the index. What we are doing here, I have created a normal anchor text. Here, whenever I click on this, it will make it as a /home, /product, /contact, whatever it is needed. Whenever the URL changes, we have created a configuration file for the AngularJS web application. So we are looking for this. Whenever my URL in the browser becomes /home, load this specific template in the view. If it becomes contact, load this template /contact.html. If it is my home, template /home.html. In the same way, we can add the child routes also. Let's take a look. So here you have mentioned you have to load the template, but where you need to load, that you have to define it. For that, what we are doing, we are using this UI router directive. But this UI router directive is not a AngularJS inbuilt directive. If you want to access this directive, what you have to do, you have to inject a UI router as a dependency injection in our web application. So here you can see that you have injected a UI router as a dependency injection. So once you inject this, you should be able to access all the functionalities available in this UI router. So this UI router is having directives like UI view or sref, these kind of directives. So you can access those functionalities also. Then it is having this providers, state providers and URL router providers. Using these providers only, we will be creating our configurations file. Let's take a look over there. Let's go to our HTML. So here what is happening, whenever I click on the home, the URL has become /home. Now let's take a look at in the configuration. Here I define if my URL has become a /home, load template.html. Right? So what does it do? Whenever my URL has become /home, it will load template.html inside the view wherever I mentioned. This is a simple view, but if I have a complex one, whenever my URL becomes /product, I want to load the product.html. Let's take a look what I have it in the product.html. If I go inside the product.html, again I have a route methods and the view also. So let's take a look what I have over there. Inside the product HTML, I have one more this href and the views. Here you can see this is the href and the view. Whenever I click on this specific view, I want to load a content in this one. And what I'm using the nested view within another view, right? So if I want to achieve this kind of functionality in the configuration file itself, we can mention it. If it is a product, load my product.html, and inside that product.electronics, if I click on this electronics, load the electronics inside the tab. Here inside fashion tab, inside food. So what will happen? So each and every time you click, it will go for this configuration file. So if I click on this product, inside the product, if the electronics tab is loaded, so here you have seen electronics and slash products. So you can see it. Whenever I click on the electronics, the URL has become /product/electronics. The same way, you will see it in the configuration file /product/electronics. If it comes, load this inside electronics div. I'm not loading it as a template URL, just loading it as a template. Direct HTML itself, I should be able to load this template. It will be loaded into our view of your product HTML because this is a child view. This is how we will be loading nested routes in our AngularJS web applications. Okay, then this is fine. But normally, whenever I click on this product itself, default you can see it is loading the electronics.html, right? Let me remove this. Enter. Okay, so just I entered as a normal index.html or just I'm typing some other in the URL. Whenever I enter, automatically it is becoming /home. How does it happen? Let's take a look into our configuration file. In the configuration file, we are mentioning if it is not finding any of these URL, just load /home as a default page. This is what we are mentioning right here in the web application. So if you are changing anything in the URL, I'm going instead of /home, I'm going to type some big letters, right? So this URL configuration won't be available. So if I enter it, it will check in our configuration file. This URL won't be available. Default, it will load /home as a default URL. In this way, we can restrict the user if they enter some other unwanted user browser URL. So we should not throw this page is not found or anything. We have to go for the default page. In this way, you should be able to access those things. This is what we are calling it as a nested routes in AngularJS web application. We have seen the demo for the route. Let's go. And I wanted to build a widget. So if you want to build any other business logic or functionalities, what we can do, we should be able to access it by custom directives. Now we have seen normal ng controller, ng model, ng app. These are all the directives built by AngularJS team itself. But I don't want that. I want to build my own functionality. So how can I do this? So you can build your own custom directives. Here we should be able to build 4 types of different directives. One is element type, attribute, class, and command. So if you are building, so everyone knows about this element. Element normally what you have, the div, span, these things are element. But attributes means the type equal to text. In the text box you are giving type equal to text. That is the attribute. You can build it in the element type as or attribute type. In the same way, class or command also you should be able to build. So when do I need to use this element type attribute? Already if you are having a view for a specific HTML element, for example, I have input type. So input is my element, and whenever I give input type equal to text, it is having the view. It is like a text box, and I should be able to enter the data. It is a view, okay? So for that, you can want to give some special functionalities. I can create it as a attribute type, but I don't even have a view itself. I want to create a new view. At that time, you should be able to create it as an element type, and you can bind a view over here. Here, what we are going to see in our building widgets demo, I am going to create a element type directive for a graph. So if I run this graph, it should show whatever information I have it in my controller. It should plot it in the graph. So how can we access this? Let's go to our demo code. Go back. So widgets. Let me open these files in my HTML. So let me close other unwanted HTML files. Okay, now it is fine. Here you can see I created my own HTML element, something called line-graph. So what does it mean? So this line-graph and pie-graph, it is not a valid HTML. But let's see what is happening if we load it in the browser. Whenever I load in the browser, the line-graph, it's giving a proper line graph, and the pie-graph, it is giving the pie graph. How does it happen? Just I have given just line graph and some data I have been passed. So what is happening? For our controller, I created a custom directive called line graph. Okay, I made it as a element type. The restrict type is E, so that means it is a element type. Then I'm passing some data from the controller. I want to build the graph and I want to pass the data from the controller. I need not to build any static graph. Whatever data I'm passing, I want to build. For example, I built a graph for the cricket score. First over, whatever the scored by the batsman, 7 runs it been scored. Second over, 14 runs. Third over, 30. Fourth over, 26. And fifth over, 32 runs. So I want to plot it. I can show it in the table also. It doesn't make sense. I have to give a good user look and feel. So I build this graph and I'm passing the data from the controller. Inside that widget, whatever data I'm getting, I'm writing my own business logic over there using C3 and D3 graph. I have did that graph over using our custom widget. Okay. First, what we have to do, we have to create it as a custom widget as a module, then inject that module to our normal web application. So our ng-app, if you see, it will be a demo. Inside that, I'm injecting this graph module. I created one more module called graph module. So this graph module has been injected to this app module again. So you should be able to access those custom directives within our web application. What I'm doing, just I have my data. First over 1 run, second over 7, third 14, fourth, like that. I have mentioned the data. So whatever data I'm passing from my controller, pc.scores. So I'm passing this data to my line graph widget, and this widget is creating the line graph for me. I need not to write even a single line of code for it. In the same way, I have a data for my pie graph also. In the pie graph, what I want to do, I have Facebook user is 123, and the Twitter there are 343 users, and Google Plus there are 132 users. This is my data, whatever I have. If I pass this data to the pie graph, whatever widget I have created, you can see it over here. In the same way, I created one more directive called pie graph. I made it as an element type, and I am passing the data. Once the data has been passed, I am writing my own functionalities to show that graph in the UI. So whenever I run this web application, the data will be passed from my controller to the widget, and the widget will render the data and it will show it in the UI. That's why you are seeing all the data. So whatever I passed from the controller, that has been displayed right here. In this way, you should be able to build a custom graphs using our AngularJS widgets. This is what we are calling it as a custom directives in AngularJS. So who are using AngularJS? If you see, AngularJS has been used by YouTube, freelancing, Paytm, and Netflix. These guys are using AngularJS client-side framework in their websites. Next one, global opportunities. So if you see the AngularJS opportunities, it has started by 2009, but before that they are not using this AngularJS as much because of browser support. Now all the latest browsers are supporting the AngularJS, and each and every projects are using. So the AngularJS, because of that, more users are using now AngularJS. Mostly I can say nearly 60 to 70% of developers are using AngularJS as a client-side framework. Salary trends. So because if everyone is using AngularJS, it should increase our salary trend also. You can see now from the salary trends, it is going up beyond in the 2014 and the 15s. So if we use this AngularJS in our Eureka, so what are the modules we are covering over here? So first module will be the JavaScript MVC framework and AngularJS, and the next one, the dependency injections, controllers, and next module, routes, directives, filters. So in this way, we have nearly 7 modules in our Eureka course. Okay. Once you register, we will be covering each and every modules will take 3 hours of time, and we will be discussing about more in that about this module in our Eureka courses. Okay. So in Eureka, what are all the features we have? If you see, we have live online classes, class recordings, 24/7 support, and each and every module will be having quiz, so we should be get to know about what we learned in the specific module. And last, we will be having our project work also. So do you guys have any questions regarding this AngularJS session or whatever we discussed about it? If you have anything, you can post it in the question window. I will be answering for all your questions, guys.
Thank you, Linjit. Thanks for
Okay,
the
so I
insight.
got,
Thank you for the insightful webinar. Yeah, we would request you to take the questions now. They are available on your questions tab. Request you to read out the questions and their answers.
yeah, sure, Deepika. Thank you, I'll do that. So we got questions from the people. Let's go out from one by one. So from Shashank, we have a question. NGF directive can be given in any HTML tab. So the NGF, wherever you are mentioning the NGF directive, from there it will be considered as an AngularJS application. It can be added to any other elements like HTML, body, or div. Wherever you want to add a NGF directive, it can be added. It will be converted as a dynamic DOM over there. Whatever, if you are mentioning it in the body, whatever you have inside the body, that will be rendered and it will be converted as a dynamic object. So you can add the NGApp in anywhere, HTML, body, div, span, wherever it is. So from Muthukrishnan, we have a question. What is the difference between data-ng-value and normal ng value? If you see the old way of using the AngularJS applications, like we have the old version like before that one releases. So over there, instead of using normal ng-value, we'll be using data-ng-value. Now it has been deprecated. Instead of using this very big directive data-ng-value, just you can use it as ng-value. That is a deprecated functionality. In the newer versions and all, we won't be using it as a data-ng-value. So from Ramakrishna Pandey, we have a question. What is the difference between ext.js and AngularJS, which is the most preferable when using the framework at server side? To be frank, in my last 2 years or 2.5 years back, we used ext.js, that is a Sencha. But now, once after we started using this AngularJS, I personally felt AngularJS is better than this ext.js and backbone frameworks. It will be compatible with all the server-side components, whatever it is. It can be a Java with Spring Framework, a Java with Jersey, Maven, whatever you are using, that doesn't matter. So AngularJS will be supportable with all the client-side and all the server-side frameworks. It can be a Java, .NET, PHP, whatever it is. That doesn't matter. So what you have to do, just expose your API layers. AngularJS consume those API layers, and you should be able to transmit the data between client and the servers. So from Gijo Matthew, we have a question. Is the charts are given by AngularJS or it is a third-party JS? So whatever charts I have used, that is a third-party D3 and C3JS. I used those D3 and C3 inside my AngularJS component. I made it as a custom directive. Those are the third-party JS files. I can use it inside my AngularJS file. So from Shivaji, we have a question. Can we use the combination of AngularJS and Knockout.js? AngularJS and Knockout.js both are JavaScript MVC framework. Both are having some similar functionalities. Okay, so why do you need to use the same two JavaScript frameworks in the client side? So if you want to use only AngularJS or Knockout.js. It is like, is it possible to use .NET and Java in the server side? Okay, it is having two different way of using. Okay, it is can't be used combined in our browser. So if you are using Knockout, just use only the Knockout.js, or if you are using Angular, use only AngularJS. Okay, but if you ask me, it is better than Knockout, Ember, and Backbone. You can check out the AngularJS features, whatever available over there. So if you are starting the project newly, you can use only the AngularJS. if you started this Knockout.js, what you can do, you can have some modules around in Knockout.js, and whatever the new modules you are building, start building it with AngularJS. Then convert all the old modules from Knockout to Angular. That is also possible. Do you guys have any other question? So from Shivakumar, we have a question. How are the career opportunities? If you see now, last 2 or 2.5 years, AngularJS is being used by most of the companies. Okay, so whoever starts the project, they want to complete it and they want to make it to the completion stage in the very short span. So if you want to write each and everything in the custom way, that will be trouble. But if you are using AngularJS, so we will be having everything as inbuilt modules. Just pull it into our project, then you can use it. So it will be increasing. So everyone is using AngularJS in the project. If everyone started using the AngularJS project, we will be having more career opportunities in our market. So it is because of that, it is increasing the career opportunities also. So from Prod, we have a question. What is the use of Node.js in AngularJS? Node.js is a server-side component. So however you have Java.NET, in the same way we will be building our server-side component with Node.js. It is not at all anything to do with Angular. So it will act as a server. Over there you can build your server-side functionalities and you can access those server-side functionalities in the AngularJS. You can't compare with Node and Angular. That is totally different. So from Daniel we have a question. How can we send the parameters by using the route? So now, okay, I have this functionality. I have a users list in the left hand side, something like Daniel or Linjit, whatever it is. Whenever I click on this, I want to send the clicked user ID in the browser tab, then I should be able to access it. This is what we are calling as a URL parameters. So if you are using UI router, we have a service called $state params. Using this $state params, you should be able to access those URL parameters inside your controller. That's how we can pass the routing parameters and you can access the routing parameters in the controller also. So from Tuate we have a question. AngularJS provides a widget like Dojo provides us. Yes, AngularJS is having more inbuilt components like drag and drop components or bootstrap, or if you see just drag and drop to upload the files. We have more inbuilt components. So whatever the components if you want, just inject those components as a dependency injection in your file and you can use it. In our demo also we have seen the UI router we have used as a external module, we injected into the web application, then accessed in our controller. So like that we have n number of widgets available in the market. Whatever you need, inject into the web application, access those functionalities. That is really possible. So from Deepak Soni we have a question. How can we detect the syntax error in AngularJS expressions in HTML page? So whenever you are getting a syntax error in AngularJS web application, so if you are using Chrome or Firefox, if you are using a Chrome, it will be automatically, you will be having a default developer tool. Whatever error you are getting, that will be available in the Chrome console. But if you are using a Firefox, you can use Firebug. So if you are getting any other syntax error, that will be printed over there. So let's show that to you. In the Chrome, press F12, that is the shortcut for the developer tool. Over here, if you are getting any error, that will be printed. With that error, you should be able to find what is the mistake you have done it in your AngularJS or JavaScript. So we have 1 more minute. Let's take last 2 or 3 questions. So if you have any other questions, you can post it now. So from Hazal Hussain, we have a question. How can we tell AngularJS is testable? So in AngularJS, we are strictly following a JavaScript MVC framework. So each and everything is separated. It's not like a DOM manipulator. It is full and full data manipulation. If you are doing with the data manipulation, it is like normal our object-oriented language. So however you are writing your unit test cases, in the same way, we should be able to write all the unit test case in the AngularJS also. If it is a data manipulation, it will be really difficult. Java manipulation, that's why it is fully testable object. The last question we have, that is, it's known as AngularJS, that Angular 2.0 is completely different from Angular 1. So something tell about that. So AngularJS 2.0, what they are trying to do, they are trying to build everything with like our Java. So however we have a class and inherit the class or call the constructor everything. In the same way, they are trying to do it with, they are trying to do this AngularJS, okay? But it is bit different from our Angular. But if you are not understanding our AngularJS functionalities like two-way binding or control inheritance, it will be bit difficult to understand this 2.0. But it's not completely different. We have the same features, whatever we have it in AngularJS. We have most of the features in AngularJS 2.0 also. Okay, guys, and thank you very much for attending this webinar.
Linjit, thanks for this
So if I
insightful.
know I didn't answer for, sorry, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Deepika, sorry, go
yes,
ahead.
yes. Thank you so much for this insightful presentation. Yes, so those of you whose question has not been answered, you can go to TechGig webinar page where you joined this webinar from, and you could post your questions there. And thank you so much. We are really thankful to all the participants for participating in this webinar. It was indeed a great session. Thank you all. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah.